Hello YouTube, welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Kevin and this is the Red Pilling channel. So, again, this video is going to be about, it's continuing off the latest topic, more about the latest talk in regards to the Iran and Israel war that took place, like almost, like last week, 10 days it took place, or a 12-day war, I think it took place, and it looks like Trump was able to get a deal. He had a lot of controversy for striking Iran, and it did cause a divide. There was a big divide because of it, and and certain people who disagree, I feel like are being called woke now, neocons, and the people who so think we should go to war with Israel against Iran are calling us woke, who disagree, the anti-war people. And I think they're people who are anti-war, too isolationist, or too MAGA, basically. They're calling us woke now. So, I don't know. So, anyway, there's this channel called Young Turks by Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur. I know he's immigrant. His ethnicity is Turkish. So, I forgive me if I pronounced his last name wrong, but anyway, that's who this channel's from. You're probably familiar with them. They're not exactly conservative at all, but they're more anti-war for sure, and they're definitely agree with Trump a lot more on the war side, and they seem to agree with Tucker, and Young Turks, hosts tend to be more on par with the whole thing of war, and they took notice to how Tucker and certain people on MAGA are being called woke by neocons, it seems. So I'm going to play this video. I don't think I'm going to play the whole 18 minutes, but I'm going to play it long enough just to give you an idea, and then I'll give you some thoughts when I'm at the end, when I finish playing the video. So here you go.
So hilarious, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised because they always accuse you of being exactly the way that they themselves are. Is anyone who asks questions or disagrees is woke now? Have you noticed this? The woke right? So, I'm not sure that we should have a war with Iran right now, and it seemed like there were a lot of problems here, and people I know are dying of drug ODs. Shut up, racist! You're woke. It's wait, what? Or people who are clearly working on behalf of a foreign country accuse you of working on behalf of a foreign country. It's so amazing.
Tucker Carlson had former
So Ana
Fox News
of
host
Young Turks
Clayton
is now responding
Morris
to it
on his show, on his podcast, and it was an hour and a half of neocon bashing. It was incredible. And before we get to all the different elements of that conversation, which, by the way, covered the lies that persuaded Americans to support the preemptive war in Iraq, there was also
the number one food.
Sorry, there's an ad.
Huh? Okay, let's see.
Fastest way to clear out stuck poop is by adding more fiber to your diet.
No.
Conversation about how
Sorry
neocons
about the
are
ad.
actually liberals. I actually want to discuss that in a moment as well. I do want to address what you just heard in that clip, because I too have been accused of being woke because I'm against supporting Israel based on identity politics, and I'm also against, clearly, what they're doing in Gaza and what they're doing in the West Bank. And so who called me woke? Well, Konstantin Kisin, who's one of the hosts over at Trigonometry. That's also a podcast. I was responding to criticism over my demeanor, how I handled myself on Piers Morgan's show yesterday. And I'm sorry, when you have an IDF spokesperson gaslighting the hell out of people and pretending like a genocide isn't a genocide, when you have him smiling and smirking as I'm talking about the slaughter of innocent people, I get a little offended by that. I get a little worked up. And so I wrote, polite debates with men who smirk as I bring up the slaughter of innocents is nonsensical, to which Konstantin Kisin says, woke is so back, baby, with a laughing emoji. So this whole thing about wokeness, I want to address it real quick. Wokeness is identity politics on steroids, okay? It's basically basing your opinion on the identity of the group that you're either defending or speaking out against. In this case, people like Konstantin Kisin, who, as far as I know, is an American, isn't Israeli, but for whatever reason seems to be obsessed with providing cover for the genociders in Israel, thinks that it's woke to be concerned about said genocide, about the slaughter of innocent people. And what are you basing your opinion on, other than the identity of the people that you are providing cover for, of the Israelis? For me, it doesn't matter if we're talking about civilian deaths on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. Take a look at how I covered what happened on October 7th on this show, how enraged I was about the civilians that were slaughtered by Hamas, because those are human beings. I don't see them as any different than Palestinian civilians. But for whatever reason, for Konstantin Kisin, it's totally okay to value civilian lives on one side and just brush aside all of those tens of thousands of civilians who have been killed on the Palestinian side. That's identity politics on steroids. That's what's woke.
Yeah, so first of all, I think the whole conversation is nonsense, to be honest, because they just call whatever they're against woke. They're not even trying to make sense.
Which is what stupid people do.
Right.
Yeah.
But now the problem for them is that when they do it against people that are also on the right, like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they are exposed for being the dumbasses that they are. So they were oftentimes just as dumb when they accused everyone on the left of being woke.
Agreed,
And they'd say absurd things. Now, this is slightly, it's a bit of a tangent, but it's a similar concept, which is they're like, oh, Kamala Harris is a communist and a Marxist. You're like, she's a corporatist. She works for the corporate donors, which is terrible, but that's the opposite of Marxism and communism. Try to make sense, right? And so this woke thing is similar. They're like, oh, you're all woke. What does that mean? Right? So in this case, though, if woke has any meaning at all, it's identity politics gone wrong, right?
Yes.
And so, okay, well, you guys are saying that we're not allowed to criticize Israel because we're anti-Semitic. So that's a different way of saying bigot or racist, right?
100%. Yes.
So you're shutting down the conversation with identity politics. So if woke has any definition at all, it's that. So... And by the way, that is also not uncommon. This happens way more on the right, where they're guilty of something and they do projection. And Israel is also the king of this.
Okay,
they're like,
it's where I disagree.
The Iranians are killing women and children in Israel. Like, you just killed like 40,000 women and children in Gaza, right? And so they're like, that is the worst kind of terrorism. I'm like, I kind of agree, and that's why I'm bothered you guys did it more. But they just keep on going. In this case, they're like, oh, you're anti-Semite.
Sanka, I think, is Muslim, by the way, so
be shut down, and you shouldn't be allowed to ever criticize Israel. That's why I don't do identity politics. No, that is identity politics. And if anything is woke, that's woke.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to, you're going to love this, Cenk. This is totally your wheelhouse. Probably after we come back from this video, I should just leave, because you're going to love this and you're going to want to talk about it forever. They get into the inner workings of corporate media and how they drum up support for war. Take a look.
MSNBC, we learned, had a 2-for-1 booking, official booking plan. That meant 2 pro-war voices for every 1 anti-war voice. It's such an important piece of this to have that propaganda piece of this, the manufacturing of consent for war. Yeah. And we have, again, a long history of this. You don't do it without the newspapers. You don't do it without the television stations. You don't do it without the Fox News or the CNNs, the MSNBCs. No, totally right. I mean, CBS changed the name of their show to Showdown with Saddam. I'm Clayton Morris, host of Showdown with Saddam. We haven't attacked them yet, but that's the name of my show. Welcome. We're replacing Phil Donahue with Countdown Iraq. Like, so you're framing all of this ahead of time. The propaganda is there ahead of time, so it's all being laid out. It becomes an inevitability that we are going to attack.
The show should have been called, "What the hell does Saddam Hussein have to do with 9/11?"
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's what we were saying on the air on the Young Turks before the war began and after the war began. So, and Anna's right, because this is literally chapter 5 of my book, Justice is Coming. It's called The Matrix, and it's about how corporate media is the number one weapon for corporate rule. So, whenever corporate interests are
true.
aligned, you will have MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News all agree. And we showed you a pretty spectacular case of that yesterday when we showed you all 3 cable news shows going, boy, Donald Trump, way to attack Iran. Same exact thing they did before the Iraq War. Now, if you're wondering why, well, there's a couple of reasons why. So, as I explained in the book, and I mentioned Phil Donahue, that Clayton Morris just mentioned there as well, what MSNBC did back then was anyone that was on the air that was against the war, they took them off.
Yeah.
Phil Donahue was their number 1 rated show. They took him off the air because he was against the Iraq War. Ashley Banfield was this new star that they had stolen from another station. They were so proud of her. She covered 9/11, was a big up-and-coming star. She did a speech.
It was so sick. I remember.
And then Jesse Ventura was on the show for the really profitable parts of GE, which is war making, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot.
And he talks about one of the things he did that got him into a lot of trouble. Let's go to D3.
Okay.
I made the mistake of reading Osama bin Laden's manifesto on CNN. Not an endorsement of Osama bin Laden, obviously.
Right, but it's news.
Well, I just think it's important to know why people do things. You can disagree completely, but I think it's important to be honest about other people's motives. And so I read this, and maybe it's all made up or whatever, but can you trust Osama bin Laden? No. But I think, do I like Osama bin Laden? No, obviously. But I'm an American, but I think it's important to know why, at least what he said about why he did it. And the 2 reasons, there are a number of reasons, but the 2 big ones were you've got U.S. forces on the Saudi Peninsula, 2 most holy cities in Islam, Mecca, Medina, like that's offensive to me. And the second reason was you're in critical support of Israel. So I read this on the air at CNN. Whoa, shouldn't have done that. I was immediately denounced as an anti-Semite.
So he worked over at CNN between 2001 and 2005. Those were like my high school years, and I was not watching cable news. So he worked over at CNN between 2001 and 2005.
Right.
Those were like my high school years, and I was not watching cable news. So I didn't even know that happened. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And so if you reference Osama bin Laden's manifesto, you were going to get called an anti-Semite. Now, that doesn't make any sense. You're not
endorsing it.
I read the Unabomber's manifesto. That doesn't make me a bomber. I wanted to know why he did it.
Right.
I'm in the news business. We're supposed to find out why they did it, right? So that's why it's very curious when news organizations say, don't do the news.
Yeah.
Don't tell people why he did it.
Okay.
It could be that he did it for a terrible reason. It makes us hate him more, not less, right? And it doesn't matter. You kill 3,000 Americans, we're going to hate him anyway, right?
Hate Trump. There's no one who hates Trump more than the Murdochs. I mean, I got fired in April of 2023. In May of 2023, they asked me to run for president against Trump and said they would back me. Obviously, I'm not running for I would never get elected anyway. Plus, I like Trump. I mean, that's the funny thing is, I actually genuinely, I get frustrated. I'm frustrated now.
So hold on.
like
Sorry,
Trump.
you just said that, and they asked you to run for president against Trump. The Murdochs.
Yeah. Lachlan Murdoch said you should run for president. We'll back you. The whole thing. The whole
Fox News apparatus.
And not just Fox, but Wall Street Journal.
All of their
Post,
papers,
Times
everything.
One. Absolutely, yeah, we'll back you.
And that came right from.
You should do that. I was already gone. They'd already canceled my show. I was still under contract, but they canceled my show. You should run. We support you. You should run.
We want to stop Trump.
Yeah, well, he was running.
I thought that was interesting. Interesting for a number of different reasons. You can talk about the Murdochs, obviously, not.
Okay, well, that's pretty much the end of the video, but yeah, we have corporate powers, and our government that are so obsessed with war blowing up countries, making certain countries unstable, and their excuse is always about regime change. And that's one thing I'm happy about. There's some people on MAGA who are kind of a little bit too panicked. It wasn't even an all-out war, and it wasn't an invasion. So if it was an invasion, then I would have been upset, but it's not an invasion. And Trump did his strike in those areas that he needed to do, but it was to prove a point because Iran was acting unfaithful and he needed to get their attention. It seemed to work. So Trump stopped the war. So they didn't really even join the war like some people on MAGA seems to be, having panic about. But with that being said, so going back, but I do think it's silly though that the certain MAGA though has been called the woke right by neocons though, because they're not shilling for war and they're not for regime change in these countries. Again, regime change is a failure. It doesn't work because they know nothing about this country, these countries' history and what their culture is. So how can you force a regime change on nations who don't believe in the same philosophies like democracy? Islam is not pro-democracy, so they're never going to change to that. So, and I want Iran to, and here's the thing, historically, when people have had enough with oppression and had enough of their government, they oftentimes, when they've had enough, they oftentimes take matters into their own hands and they overthrow it. So, if the Iranians are done with it, they'll overthrow them. It's happened so often in history. So nothing lasts forever. So I believe that needs to be an uprising from the people, and Americans shouldn't be involved in a regime change in Iran. That's not our place, and it only makes the tensions rise further and makes the situation worse. And the ones who often get killed the most are Christians. They always go after Christians when we intervene. Neocons don't get it. So, but yeah, it's just interesting. So you're called woke because you don't support Israel enough, or you're anti-Semitic because you read a manifesto from Osama bin Laden just reporting the news. So Tucker got in trouble just for reading the news and got accused of being racist just for reading the news, doing his job. Really? And I kind of agree. There's the whole thing with Israel and Gaza is definitely a complicated history, and it goes way back before we can even comprehend. So currently neither side are good to each other. I think both sides kind of want you to shill for their side, but Israel's definitely no angels in that too. There's a lot of people are killed on both sides. So, and as Christians, my heart goes to the Christians in Gaza who are suffering because of these wars that are happening. So hopefully there can be a deal in the Gaza-Israel thing as well with that. So, and Trump did express how upset he was with both Israel and Iran right now. He let them both have it. Both leaders have it because they don't even know what they're fighting about anymore, and, I think what my only criticism really of Israel is they seem to want United States, because they want regime change. They want to try to overthrow Iran's government, and they want the United States to try to collude with them to do that. And I don't think that's something America should be doing. So, but anyway, so yeah, is it neocons wrong to call people woke who disagree with them about war and all that stuff? I just don't know why war. They love war so much. They love, death. It seems like, why? People need to. It's a good question to ask yourself, And I noticed it's the one that they get the nastiest when you question. That even question the aspect to go into war, and it's always the first thing we think of. War should always be the last resort, and and it's not the interest. That's because there's money involved. A lot of people make money off war. So anyway, Young Turks made some good points. I didn't agree with everything Shanks said. You can tell he was biased towards Palestine, especially him. So I don't know if I take him so credibly on everything he said there, but they seem to agree with Tucker a lot on the war stuff, and Former President Eisenhower, he warned us about the military-industrial complex, about the dangers. I mean, in the 50s, and it's almost like we don't listen to what people who warned us about certain things before it got chaos. So anyway, so what do you think? Is MAGA right becoming woke? Is it woke to think you can't criticize Israel on some decisions that they make, where kind of like how Democrats shill for certain oppressed groups, people of color, certain sex orientation, gender, that Israel's kind of their way of being woke. They call you anti-Semitic if you disagree with them, even questioning things. Are neocons the ones being truly woke? Is MAGA woke, or are they, or do they have a point on things? It's just, the left definitely do woke more, but neocons, they're kind of becoming what they're playing left-wing tactics as well, what they're doing. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Let me know what you all think about that little conversation I played here for you. But anyway, if you like this video, please like. If you like this channel, please subscribe. Again, comment on the comments if you have any thoughts on this. I don't have all the answers, but please give me some thoughts if on what I say. I try to make this one particularly neutral, but again, what do you guys think? Anyway, let me know in the comments. Also, this video was an hour long, so if you might want to watch the whole conversation of Tucker Carlson in this particular video, I can put it on the link in the bottom so you guys can watch it if you're interested. But anyway, the red pilling out.